Okay, here we go. The MOASS and Black Swan theory. This is by user Region Formal via Reddit. They posted it on June 17th of this year, so just about 11 days ago. It was abridged and edited by myself, and that's what we're going to be listening to now. Just a disclaimer, whenever, from this point forward, whenever I say I'm not referring to myself. This is referring to user Region Formal. That's who I is from this point forward. Okay, here we go.
Perfect, thank you.
Background. A few years ago, I bought a book by a Lebanese statistician, Nassim Taleb, called The Black Swan. Some of you apes may have heard of it because it became a bestseller a little after the 2008 crash. The book, published in 2007, seemed to predict events that happened the following year and beyond. And we'll cover some key takeaways from that book here. Section 1. The existence of black swans. The origin of the term black swan is in fact about 2,000 years old, comes from ancient Rome. It refers to the improbability of there being black-feathered swans in the world. It likens this to the possibility that any system of thought, especially those currently taken for granted, could suddenly be undone by any unforeseen event that disproves it. One way to think of it, no one really believes in the Loch Ness Monster anymore. But what if a freshly deceased monster gets washed up on the shores of the loch tomorrow? We would all have no choice but to fundamentally change our conceived beliefs about many things, particularly the natural sciences, of course, in that case. And so it was for eons about black swans themselves, with the conceived notion in Europe that there could be none of these particular creatures existing in this world. But, to their immense surprise, this improbability suddenly became defunct in an instant when they were actually discovered in Western Australia in the late 17th century. No doubt the local Aboriginal Australians were just as surprised at how surprised the Dutch explorers looked when encountering the common birds to them. Section 2, Black Swan Theory. So the theory is that sometimes events happen that are almost unbelievably shocking in both their impact and for the fact that they could not be predicted beforehand. Nothing like it has happened in at least living memory, and no one alive could even consider it could actually occur. The more detailed definition that Taleb gives in his book is as follows, quote, "What we call here a black swan is an event with the following three attributes. First, it is an outlier. It lies outside the realm of regular expectations because nothing in the past can convincingly point to its possibility. Second, it carries an extreme impact. Third, despite its outlier status, human nature makes us concoct explanations for its occurrence after the fact, making it explainable and predictable. Like, of course there's black swans. I stop and summarize the triplet. Rarity, extreme impact, and retrospective, though not prospective, predictability. A small number of black swans explains almost everything in our world, from the success of ideas and religions to the dynamics of historical events, to elements of our own personal lives." End quote. Some examples that he gives in the book are the sudden rise of the World Wide Web, the sudden outbreak of World War I, the sudden collapse of the USSR, and the sudden terrorist attacks of September 11th. Well, what about COVID-19? Some people, begin quote, "Some people claim that the pandemic is a black swan, hence something unexpected, so not planning for it is excusable. The book they commonly cite is The Black Swan, but if they read it, they would know that such a global pandemic is explicitly presented in the book as a white swan, something that would eventually occur with great certainty. The bailouts of 2008 and 9 saved the banks, but mostly the bankers, let's be honest there. And bankers who lost more money than ever earned in the history of banking received the largest bonus pool in banking less than 2 years later in 2010. That was a blatant case of corporate socialism and a reward to an industry whose managers are stopped by the taxpayer. Thus, the asymmetry, moral hazard, and what we call optionality for the bankers can be expressed as follows. Heads, and the bankers win. Tails, and the taxpayer loses." Third, despite its outlier status, human nature makes us concoct explanations for its occurrence after the fact, making it explainable and predictable, essentially meaning who will be the scapegoat. Of course, given the financial hellhole that most of the world may have descended to by then, they'll try to find an easy target, one that has no leader and thus no central point to defend itself. And by then, running counter to the rest of society whose members would have done rather well for themselves through the crash. Triggers of black swan events. I refer to you, of course, the apes. No doubt, we shall be at or near the top of their blame list as for why the next black swan event occurs, the great market crash of 2021. Complete nonsense, of course, and a narrative that we must resist and educate others about. However, I do think these detractors will be right about one thing. Apes and the MOASS will be at the very heart of the 2021 market crash, not as the cause of the whole event, but as the final trigger, pushing the first falling domino at the end of many years building up to it. MOASS, the true black swan of our age. So am I saying the 2021 market crash will be one such black swan event similar to the ones above? Not at all. The very nature of financial markets means that crashes are inevitable events, and entirely predictable too. And as many of the due diligences posted on the AMC stock subreddit have already stated. Yet, they will say that the crash is a black swan event and the apes are to blame. But they will be lying and knowing very well that they are lying. The actual black swan event will in fact be the MOASS, the mother of all short squeezes. Let me remind you once again of the three criteria that Taleb gave: rarity, extreme impact, and retrospective, but not prospective, predictability. The MOASS will not only be rare, but in fact, unique. All the rules that the DTC, OTC, SEC, etc. have been bringing in ensure that apes can never win under these circumstances ever again in the future. The MOASS will have an extreme impact on the lives of hundreds of thousands of hodling apes. That's what the generational transfer of wealth precisely is. And let's not forget the extreme impact it will have on thousands of short sellers. So enjoy this experience, apes. You're helping to trigger an actual black swan event. In fact, the black swan event of our age. There will be books and documentaries and even movies made about these days we are living in through years to come. The end of history indeed. For those who joined during the call, black swan events are sporadic and unpredictable events, in many cases causing significant shifts in the future direction of world history. The government, big banks, and the media will declare that the impending market crash is a black swan event caused by the apes. However, it will be no such thing. They have caused their own very predictable downfall, and the MOASS is just the trigger of their demise. It is the MOASS that will be the actual black swan event. Never before and never again.